Hey y'all, it's Jessie Renee. Today I'm going to show you how I use FireAlpaca. So I'm going to start with using this reference photo of my cat Bagheera. He was very gracious to let be a model. What you want to do is hit Control A, which is to select the whole thing, and then Control C and Control V, and that pastes it. Control C is copy, Control V is paste, and that will paste it right on top. I'm going to hit Control T, which is transform, and just drag the corner like that and get it to the size that I need. In Photoshop you have to hold down the shift button to make sure that the proportions stay the same on all sides, but in FireAlpaca you don't have to do that, so just hit OK and it should be at the size that you need. Now these are the layers over here on this side. I usually keep the background gray. I don't know, you don't have to do that, but I do. So the rest of the layers are transparent, and that button here is a new layer, and just double click on this and you can rename it Highlights. So I've got different layers here: sketch, color, ink, shadow, and highlights, and this is the reference layer. You want to have everything on separate layers. I'm just going to go ahead and start working on the sketch here, and I'll do that in time lapse. Here we go. Okay, now that the sketch is done, I'm just going to hide the reference and make a new layer over top of the sketch as like a refined sketch. So I'm just going to hit the new layer button and rename it Refined Sketch, and then go back into my sketch layer and change the opacity, which is this slider right here. Now I'm just going to use that little magnifying glass to zoom in, and this up here turns the canvas. Up at the top there's the left turn, right turn, and then center, which gets everything back to normal. So I want it turned a little bit, so I'm going to do that. And we'll go into time lapse and work on the refined sketch. I should mention that while you're working, you can also flip the canvas. There's a button on the top right corner where you can flip the canvas back and forth, like that. So now I think his head is a little small. I'm just going to select it and hit Control T and transform it. That's what I just did there. So the refined sketch is done. I'm just going to go into the inks layer now, and if you hit the letter D on your keyboard, it will change the color on the palettes to black and white, like that. So any color really, just red and green, hit D, black and white. Now I'm going to go down here and hit the pen tool instead of the pencil. I've been sketching with pencil, but now I'm using pen. Turning the canvas, and this up here is the navigation window, and you can just move stuff around that way. It makes it a little bit quicker and easier. And that's what the pen looks like. This slider changes the size of the pen. I want a little bit thinner. That's good. So I'm going to bring down the opacity of the refined sketch and then just start inking. Okay, so this is why layers are important. I accidentally drew the whiskers on the color layer instead of the ink layer, which is where those should be. So what I'm going to do now to fix that is I'm going to copy them, paste them on a new layer above the ink, and then hit Control E, which merges it onto the ink layer. So now the whiskers are on the ink layer. If I had done it on the ink layer, I wouldn't have had to do that. It would have been a lot easier. But now I'm going to go and add some color. And because Bagheera's a black cat, I'm just going to do sort of like a base dark color, and then I'll go and refine it later on after I've got the space kind of filled in however I want it. And if you don't want to take a whole lot of time using the brush tool to fill in color, you can just fill in the outlines and then use the paint bucket tool, which is also on the left hand side with the rest of the tools. That does save time if you like using that. Okay, coloring is done, and what I want to do now is go to the top here above the layers. There's this thing called Protect Alpha. Just check that box and you can color over it, and it won't go over the top, it won't spill over the edge. It is the same thing as locking the transparency in Photoshop. Now that I have the color layer locked, I think I'm going to go in and change it to a brown. I kind of want like a warmish look to it, and I can just take the fill bucket tool and fill it in. I won't have to worry about the color spilling over because it's locked. So there are some soft brushes down here, airbrush and watercolor. I'm going to use the watercolor brush and just do sort of like a lighter color in certain places, like his ears. There's a little white patch on his tummy. And back up to the pen tool, which is a harder brush. I'm going to color in the darker places, like his nose. And I'm going to do his eyes on a different layer, because I'm going to need to do shading on those separately. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And you can start with the same amount of layers that I started with at the beginning, but you can also add and delete layers as you go along in your painting. Alright, so what I'm about to do now is work on the shadows and highlights. So I'm going to make a square and fill that in with a warmer color as sort of like a sunlight spot, so I can visually see where the light is going to fall on Bagheera. I want that square to be softer, so I'm going to go up into layer and hit Gaussian blur and just adjust the slider to however I see fit. I think that looks good. Hit OK, and it's good to go. I'm just going to take the airbrush and do the gray underneath where the shadows would fall, so that way it's got more of the 3D look to it, like the sunlight not hitting those places. Okay, now that we have that visual, I'm going to go up to the shadow layer and I'm going to bring it down to just above the color layer, so that way we can clip it to the color layer so that the shadows don't spill over the edge. And you also want to change your layer style from normal to multiply. Now that the shadows are done, let's go into highlights. I'm going to move that down and also clip it, but I'm setting the highlights to overlay so that it's brighter, but not overly saturated. So those are the basics of how to use FireAlpaca. Now I'm just adjusting what I have on the different layers, adding some extra here, taking away a little extra there. But that's basically it. Those are the tools, those are the layers, and when you save, you can also save. FireAlpaca has where you can save as a PSD, so you can transfer your files to Photoshop as well, but I'm just going to save mine as a PNG. So that's how I use FireAlpaca. Give this video a thumbs up if this has been helpful to you, and don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks, see you next week.